foundation. We've got a new first floor deck. But if you look at this house, you can tell this is not a brand new house. In fact, this is an 1880s house. I'm in Boston visiting my builder friends, Thoughtforms, and they took this 140-year-old house that had a rubble foundation and a crawl space underneath it, raised it up, put a real foundation on it, and they're doing a beautiful addition. Now this is a historic project, but there is a lot of cool things that I think everybody could learn from today on how they did this process. Today's build show about raising an old house with a brand new foundation. Let's get going. All right, so we've got a 140-year-old house with a brand new foundation and a full 8.5, maybe 9-foot ceiling downstairs. A lot of work had to happen to get to this stage of construction. Unfortunately, I missed the cribbing that happened a while ago and the foundation and excavation. But Greg, the project superintendent, is going to walk me through some videos and some pictures exactly how he did this process. Let's go meet him over in the field office. All right, Greg, so this image now is showing that you got that house 5 feet above its original location. You can see that steel beam web, all the cribbing's in place. But at this point, you still had the full deck, the full foundation in place, right?
Correct. The whole foundation, this is what you can see is when we prepped the deck. Initially, these holes, we cut about 5-foot square, so you had about 6-inch clearance for all the cribbing to go through. So one of the things that having the deck in is it facilitates the guys moving around, because as the building went up, they were walking on this deck. They had pre-stacked the cribs the cribbing that they would need near each pile of cribs, so it facilitated the process going up. So every time it went up, they threw in 4 more pieces of cribbing, reset the jacks, and having the existing deck on the floor allowed them to do that. But since we were replacing the deck, we left it behind, so we lifted the building from above the existing deck.
Makes sense. So an easier work platform. As that building is lifted now, is there any issues with wind or racking or any of that? I mean, did that worry you as the builder on the job?
It worried me, but not Jim. He was like, no. Don't worry about it. You got a lot of building here, and truth be told, I went through and put a bunch of diagonal braces in before he came, mostly because it was an old building. We took all of every piece of, it had no plywood in it.
Right.
And so I put a couple of diagonal braces in, and then Jim came in and cut right through them, and just to get his support on it. But he had a high degree of confidence that there would be no issues here. Also, it was the shape of the building lended itself to staying put. It's an L-shaped building.
Yeah.
It wasn't long and narrow.
Makes sense. And you're not worried about that tip over with a big long narrow building.
No, I wasn't. It had a good sized footprint, and I think that lended itself to kind of staying put.
All right, Greg, so the demo's done on the first floor, and it looks like at this point you've even demoed the foundation out.
Yeah, we took out the foundation. The entire foundation went, and that was picked out from outside. But one of the things that we did do is initially we had cut a hole in the side of the building that allowed us to remove that particular chunk of foundation, and that allowed us to ramp down in. So that was used initially to take the excavate from the cribbing pits that we had done before we lifted the house, but it served as our initial place of attack to bring in the smaller machines like this one, and they dug their way down in and worked their way around the foundation as the larger equipment was excavating the foundation and pulling it to the outside. As time went on, the smaller equipment would excavate around the cribbing towers that you see here and place it beyond and in the reach of the larger equipment, which would take it out, and then it was loaded into trucks and taken away.
So this is like a mini excavator with tracks. Was that the main equipment you used? Did you use anything else under there besides that?
We had you can see the tail end of the skid steer over there.
Oh, okay. You got a Bobcat skid steer in there.
A lot of times that was just primarily to facilitate, because as you know, like to take one bucket of a mini excavator and then bring it over here. It's going to take you a month of Sundays to get the material out of there. So if we were digging through a lot of clay, the material was really hard, so the Bobcats could not dig into it all. They could only move material that had been done once by the excavator. So they were facilitating getting it to a point where larger equipment could scoop it up.
So really, at that point, it's an excavator dance to get the different equipment, the different sizes. You had pretty good headroom, and then And then ultimately, once you got to that level you needed, then really it's bring a foundation crew in that's, the same as probably your new construction foundation crew, right?
It is. What's kind of just curious is that the fly in that particular ointment is that the foundation people are used to having their cages for their formwork to be craned into the center of the hole, and then everybody can move the forms out of there. So there was a lot more carrying involved. So the logistics of that, they were very grumpy about that. So that they had to lug, every form had to be carried a larger distance. So as we were down inside, you were saying, now I'm remembering you're down inside, well, why did they use these 10-foot forms? You had a 9.5-foot wall. Why did they use 10-foot forms? It was because the foreman on the job insisted on it with his boss, because he said, I'll be damned if I'm carrying those 10-foot forms up and down out of this hole. You give me some 3s and some 6s and I can make this work.
Makes sense. Love it. Greg, really appreciate the run through on that. Before we leave your site, would you mind giving me a tour for these guys of just a couple interesting things that I saw in the house under construction, and we can show them the foundation that's in place?
Sure.
All right, we'll meet you in the basement, guys. All right, Greg, so foundation's in place. It's not like you just drop the house down and you're done, right?
No.
I mean, it looks to me like you cut the ankles off the house here.
Yeah.
You got maybe a foot or so missing at the bottom.
One of the plan is that they wanted to gain some ceiling height in the first floor. But from a zoning standpoint, the house already exceeds the allowable height. But as an existing building, we're allowed to maintain that height. So to gain headroom in the first floor, what we actually did is we lifted the building up 5 feet, we put it down 5 feet, but when we brought the foundation out of the ground, we kept it a foot low. And hence, that deck that you saw was removed initially, kind of came to where you can see the bottom of the cut there in the corner. That was where the first floor deck originally came in.
Got it.
So now we've gained a foot of ceiling height on the first floor.
And I'm assuming that there's a fair amount of smart framer going on here to try and get a 140-year-old house onto a new foundation.
So what we did is before we lifted the building and before we inserted the steel in the building, we had to make a very careful survey of what the existing conditions were. And a lot of that was just not only understanding the geometry of the footprint, but the geometry of the outside size and shape of the building as we went up, because what we were trying to do was any kind of existing framing that had the potential for being absorbed inside the new frame, we had to know, is the wall leaning out? Is it leaning in? Is it leaning to the, this direction or that direction? So we were in there for a significant period of time with a number of our guys. We were, strings and lasers and levels and trying to determine what that footprint is and feeding that data back to the architect. And she, in turn, sent it back to us. And we went about through 3 or 4 iterations of the foundation in order to, and we're talking, we're going to take this, we're going to move it, we're going to take this foundation wall, we're going to move it an inch this way or an inch that way, in order to give us, in the end of the day, a square building
that you could get relatively
that we
plumb.
could get plumb, because the interior finishes, because when you come back,
it's going to be amazing.
It's going to be amazing.
I love it.
And so we needed a true building in which to be able to insert those finishes into.
I love it. All right, unrelated question. The big red X you got on the front and the side of the building. As I pulled up, I was thinking, is that like a survey mark? They're trying to see if the buildings move, but it doesn't look accurate enough to be for a surveyor. What is that big red X?
The big red X is for the Cambridge Fire Department. So what happens is that signals a firefighter if there's a fire in the building, the structure is compromised, don't enter. Fight the fire from the outside.
Gotcha.
So
we're not worried about saving a life here because no one's living in it.
No one's living in the building. They don't have to
it.
do anything heroic. They can fight the fire, contain the fire in the structure.
But don't send a fireman in.
Don't go in the building.
That makes sense. But we want to go in the building, so let's meet y'all inside. Greg, it's so cool to see this old framing with it was real 2-inch by 4-inch lumber. It makes our modern 2x4s look a little spindly, don't they?
And it makes them look a little small by comparison. Also, this building was put together in a number of different ways, because it was different pieces of the puzzle went in between the 1880s and the 1920s. So sometimes if you look up, you'll see that there's some post and beam work.
Yeah.
It's been remodeled a couple times, not only in our generation, but subsequent generations. So people have been through the building a number of times doing different things. You can see way up there, at one point somebody put an LVL in there.
Yeah, they
that
sure
was done
did.
relatively recently, back in the, I think in the aughts that was done. And then there was some alterations were made when they put I think the staircase may have been one of the latter additions.
It's such an interesting house. When you go into the basement and you look around, it looks like brand new construction, right? You've got new I-joists down there. We've got some steel columns, beautiful concrete work by your guys, by the way. Brand new looking house, but then you come up here and you've got this hybrid where you've got old framing, you're scabbing on in a few places, you're figuring out how to make all the openings work. And not only that, I wish I could come back and see this, maybe we can. I see a load of some exterior insulation happening.
Insulation, yeah.
And I know that you guys are really known for incredibly airtight, very, very efficient buildings. So I suspect you're going to have a very low blower door score. You're going to have some new equipment. You're probably going to be using heat pumps instead of gas in a lot of places here. So Thoughtforms, you guys are an amazing contractor, and so fun to spend some time with you, Greg, and
Nice to meet
see
you.
A smart builder take this really old building and bring it to modern standards, but also still make it look like an old building on the outside. It's pretty awesome work, my friend.
Thank you.
Guys, if you're not currently a subscriber, we've got new content here every Tuesday and every Friday. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, otherwise I'll see you next time on The Build Show.